getting rocked. Lush One in the building with my player partner Lock. Y'all know what it is, baby. It's good to see you, my guy.
Good to see you, man.
Recently got a chance to run into you at the Thop Fest, the Happiness of Pursuit Festival.
Very dope for hip hop, man.
It's there's not too many outlets
Yeah.
for indie hip hop. I mean, if there's any left, because obviously the goal for most up and coming artists is to get on like a Rolling Loud type thing.
Yeah.
Which is dope.
Yeah.
Rolling Loud's raw, but for the most part, it's like mosh pits to the sound of like rapper karaoke. People just like kind of lip syncing to
Turned
their
up,
songs.
yeah.
It's like, it's a vibe. It's a cool energy. But
Yeah.
as far as like the art of MCing and rocking crowds and DJs like cutting up,
It's a different world.
you don't really see it too much. So shouts to 60 East for
Yeah,
even,
man, he put that on, the Happiness of Pursuit Festival down here in SoCal was dope, man. And it was dope to connect with a lot of, like yourself, man.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen you in how long?
I think it's like a dime at this point.
Yeah, at least.
More.
At least.
More.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know, Locksmith, one of the most elite lyricists in the world at this point.
Man.
It's safe to say you are from Richmond, California, in the Bay Area.
Bay Area,
the city of pride and purpose.
Yeah.
A lot of people, people are familiar with Oakland.
A lot of people don't know that moniker.
The city of pride and purpose.
You know that, yeah.
You see the sign, and it's there's definitely a lot of pride and purpose. But when you go in there, it
ain't no joke. Yeah.
You got to be on your P's and Q's in Richmond.
Yeah, especially when I was growing up in the 80s, 90s.
Absolutely.
I mean, what's still, it still ain't no punk, but I feel like that was like the beginning of like the, because I'm not trying to get all deep on the historical tip, but a lot of
break
people,
it down.
Yeah, a lot of people from the 70s, like my mom came there. They came from California. A lot of black folks came from the Midwest or from the South.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a lot of transplants. Like my generation is probably like that first generation of being like, of those transplant people that migrated, like that first being born and raised, in Richmond.
For your first generation. Richmond.
Yeah, of my family. Because even my brothers and sisters who are older, they were all kind of like the early part of their childhood was from like Chicago, Michigan. A lot of my neighbors, I remember growing up in South Richmond, their families were from Louisiana. Matter of fact, like even North Richmond to this day, it's like you in the South.
They got that accent.
They got that accent.
North Richmond.
Yeah, you would think you was in, they call it the NOIA, what they used to. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Once you pass, what's a Rumorill over there?
Yeah, you go over them train tracks.
Yeah, it's almost like a cliche, like the other side of the tracks. But
literally
anywhere in the Richmond Flatlands, you got to be on your P's
you got to
and
be on your
Q's,
P's
like
and Q's.
1000%. And but you have mixed nationality background, correct?
Yeah. Mom is African American, father is from Iran.
Okay, and they met in the Midwest.
No, they met here.
Okay.
They met in the Bay. They met in the Bay. Moved to Richmond before I was born. My pops raised my mother's other kids. At the time, they got married. He raised their kids, and then I came kind of later on. Yeah.
Is it safe to say? I mean, would you describe Richmond as like a blue collar town? Is that like a lot of?
Yeah. I mean, because people came here originally, they came to work at the ports.
Right.
So the city was just built around that, the refineries, the ports, all that kind of stuff was built because Richmond is right on the water, across the bridge. We call it the Richmond or the San Rafael Bridge.
Yep.
Takes you across the San Rafael, Marin County.
And then you got the Carquinez Bridge.
Carquinez Bridge, take you to Vallejo. That connects like Hercules, Rodeo, you go to Vallejo. So all these cities around the Bay Area, it's all built around ports and shipping and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And growing up out there, I'm sure, because a lot of the people I know from the Rich, it's funny. I just had Kevin Allen, aka Irk the Jerk, and Monty Draper.
Irk, yeah.
And they was talking. I told them I was about to see you, and they were like, "Oh,
yeah, those are my
left,
brothers, man. Those are my brothers.
Yeah, and
Grand National, Pat.
I had Grand Nash on, yeah. And we talked about the Rich quite a bit, and I was basically like saying to them that I know people from the Rich that lived straightforward lives and all that, but the majority of the people I know were into some type of activities.
Yeah, that's how it was.
Dope dealing, pimping, all these.
Yeah, that's what it was, man. Like, I was fortunate, man. I had my mom and dad. I had my older brother, older cousins. They kind of insulated and protect me from that. I was just hooping, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, and you could tell like
Yeah.
when you look at someone they be hooping, like you got
Yeah,
that.
I was in hoop like from like 11 years old. It was just like basketball. So people knew me like, oh, that's Allie with the basketball. You know what I mean? So I was like always at the center. People that's familiar with South Richmond, like East Shore Park,
Right.
the center over there. Hooping at Harry L's, all these type of places.
Did you
and
fuck with Crescent Park too?
That's where I was born.
Okay.
That's where I was raised in
Yeah,
Crescent
yeah,
Park.
yeah,
So I lived in
Yeah.
In Crescent Park. So the
Very
East-
notorious section for those that don't know.
It was, it wasn't. But my experience, it had its rough. But when you in it, that's the thing about like living in like the quote unquote hood, like that mentality. When you're growing up in it, that's all you knew. So that's all I knew, And for all the bad shit that was going on there was like this sense of community.
It's a village.
Yeah, it's a village, man. It's like when I grew up, like my next door neighbor, she was like my second mama. You know what I
Right.
mean? The lady next door, that was like another mom. Like everybody kind of looked after each other's kids. So it was like that village, but it was just something that happened around like the 80s, 90s. You know what I mean? Obviously with drugs.
I was gonna say it was crack probably a big
crack.
part
I
of that.
mean, I can remember being like 8 or 9 years old and seeing the first, D-boys.
Right.
You know what I mean? Pulling up, I shouted out my OG homie Mike Robinson. He pulled up in the Crescent on the little Honda Ninjas.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
And then you just like, what is that? And then you just realize, oh, that's what's going on. Then I remember one of my older, not older, but like a year or two older, first time I see somebody get arrested for, for slanging in the park, like all those kind of things. So that was like the beginning of like that. I feel like that era, in the 80s, and then
Right.
and then obviously in the 90s, it was popping. You know what I mean? People was really like moving, and you had a lot of people die, get locked up, and that was all. That was like the 80s, 90s in Richmond, man. It wasn't no joke.
Nah, absolutely. And something I always found